President Richard Milhous Nixon and Henry Kissinger, a Jew, were both major powers in the White House, and I'm going to read about their relationship to blacks while they were in power. Both were alcoholics and spent a lot of time drinking together, and both were also racist, even though Kissinger was Jewish. People in the White House and in the National Security Office, the CIA, soon found that the major problem with Kissinger and Nixon was their personalities. Nixon's drinking had to be kept quiet at all costs, and so did his racism. And I'm now going to quote from the book. There seems to have been an unrelenting stream of anti-black remarks from the president during his first year in office. In his telephone conversations with Kissinger, he repeatedly referred to blacks as niggers, jigs, and jigaboos. Some of the slurs were obviously results of Nixon's drinking bouts, but national security aides who monitored Kissinger-Nixon telephone calls came to believe that Richard Nixon, drunk or sober, was a racist. Far more disillusioning was his boss's attitude. Kissinger also repeatedly made clear his contempt for black people. Yet there was a constant stream of Kissinger asides to his staff about Nixon's racism. One theme was that Nixon had always been a racist, but did not know the correct derogatory words until he moved from California to New York in the 1960s. After Nixon had referred to blacks as jungle bunnies during one of his telephone talks with Kissinger in 1969, remember this is the time of the Equal Rights Act. I'm going to go back. Morris recalls Kissinger whimsically explained that Nixon had seen hair while in New York and gotten educated. One scene in the play consists of a recitation put to music of various derogatory and slang phrases for blacks, including jungle bunny. The National Security staff aides understood what was acceptable behavior and what was not. They would join the laughter at Alexander Haig's antics during the rare staff meetings that dealt with African issues. Morris recalls that when he would enter the Situation Room laden with briefing books, Haig would begin to beat his hands on the table as if pounding out a tom-tom. It was all very manly, a locker room mentality. Haig would make Tarzan jokes. What's your pet ape? Or, talking about blacks, say, Henry can't stand the smell. There were other comments. Sonnenfeld would joke about blacks in Washington moving into upper middle class white neighborhoods. Morris remembers he called them niggers, jigs, spades, or your dusky friends. Another recurrent Sonnenfeld complaint was that the African embassies in Washington were taking all the good embassy spots. You couldn't live on 6th Street anymore unless you wanted to have dusky friends. The racist joking invariably began whenever Morris sought White House action in the areas where he had major responsibility: Africa, AID, and the United Nations. You couldn't find 3 subjects less important to Kissinger and more the object of ridicule. Kissinger repeatedly made clear his lack of respect for the intelligence of blacks. When the State Department appointed C. Clyde Ferguson, a black law professor from Rutgers University, special relief coordinator during the Nigerian War, Kissinger asked fatuously, "Do you think he'll understand the cables?" Morris also recalls a disturbing conversation between Kissinger and Senator Fulbright. It was the spring of 1970, and the White House gave a reception and dinner for ambassadors, most of them black. who were in Washington for a meeting of the Organization of African Unity. Kissinger asked Morris to join him at the dinner, and as Morris and Kissinger were strolling from their basement offices, they bumped into Senator Fulbright, also on his way to the party. Henry walked up to him and initiated the racist conversation. Morris says, he asked, "I wonder what the dining room is going to smell like." And Fulbright said, "You never know who's going to be at your table. It's amazing to me that Henry would say such outrageous things in public." This was in a crowded hallway with lots of people coming and going. Sometimes the racist comments seemed almost surrealistic in the context of the White House and its foreign policy. After the Biafran rebellion collapsed in January 1970, Morris briefed Kissinger on the prospect for continued bloodshed between the various Nigerian troops and the defeated Igbos of Biafra. Morris explained in a response to Kissinger's question that the Igbos of Biafra were more Negroid in appearance and the Nigerians tended to be more Semitic. Kissinger, Morris later wrote, was visibly surprised and confused. "But you've always told me the Igbos were more gifted and accomplished than the others. What do you mean, more Negroid?" Earlier, there had been a brief moment of panic when Ronald L. Ziegler, the White House press secretary, who knew and cared little about Africa and its civil wars, began briefing by announcing he had a statement to read on the Nigerian War, and it's spelled nigger, I-A-N, Nigerian War. Whether out of embarrassment or ignorance, none of the press commented on the slip, Morris says. In February 1970, when Kissinger and his staff were working in Key Biscayne, the president, at play with his friends Rebozo and Abplanalp, telephoned ship to shore with a request about the foreign policy paper they were drafting. "Make sure there's something in it for the jigs," Henry Nixon said. A moment later, Morris recalls, Nixon asked again, "Is there something in it for the jigs?" Kissinger said yes. A few months earlier, when Secretary of State Rogers received good press coverage during a trip to Africa, Kissinger had been distraught with jealousy and anxiety. There had been a soothing telephone call from Nixon, also overheard by one of the national security aides. "Henry, let's leave the niggers to Bill, and we'll take care of the rest of the world." The remark became common knowledge to Morris and his colleagues. And that's the end of the excerpt that's found on page 110 and 111 of the book, The Price of Power by Seymour Hersh.